Okay, so again, thank you so much, Lynelle, for doing this conversation. I know, we it's not like we have a prior relationship. And so, you being willing to have this conversation with me, thank you, so much. Not everybody feels comfortable doing these as I found as I'm doing them. So I really appreciate you, taking the time to have this conversation. Um, can you just kind of give me as well, but anyone who may be viewing, just kind of a background about who you are, and Afro reads? Are you still there? It's like screen is frozen. I don't know if that's on my end or your end. Okay. 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 I think she's coming back out to come back in. That's okay. You're on mute.
Okay, that was my internet, huh?
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
I didn't know if that was me or you,
I
but
wasn't sure either.
but Nubia saw the same Frozen, so I guess. But now we can hear and see. Did you hear the first question?
No, ma'am. It cut off right as you were saying it.
Oh, okay, I was just saying if you can kind of just give us a general summary of your background, why you decided to join Substack, and what motivates you to do this work.
I joined Substack a couple years ago, wanted to speak about African histories and everything, but I didn't want it to sound like classroom material and dull people. And I didn't have a big readership, and I just quit. And then a couple months after that, my first Substack was Our Story. So it was standing for Our Understanding of Reality. Um, that's how the hour came in. But people weren't really reading it and stuff. So I said, well, what can I do? And so I made a personal reading challenge for myself to read one book for each African country. And so I read She Will Be King by Wayétu Moore. That's a Liberian novel. Um, and after that, I just fell in love, and I was like, oh my God, I have to put this. Let me get back on Substack and put this up there. And after that, it just things just been rolling, in its
Wow.
own way, slowly. I
Yeah.
talked about Ngugi wa Thiong'o and Chinua Achebe, and I think they're talking about their differences and similarities really sparked off things for me on Substack.
Wow. Wow. What ha- what made you center, I guess, your reading on the continent of Africa? Um,
Years ago, I had a mentor in high school. I was like 16. And until then, didn't know that Black people were like this great thing because, all we heard was Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and I'm from a small community in the South. So, I didn't know I had history right at my fingertips. And so she was telling me all this is about Black people. And then I got so excited. And so I was grabbing every nonfiction piece of literature I could grab. Um, Carter G. Woodson and all of that. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then I got into Africa, and ever since I got in there, I haven't looked back since. I've been deep into my study um, with Africa, and I can never go back because that's the beginning. So now I
yeah.
feel like a sense of pride and joy to be who I am. We weren't just slaves, because back then we didn't have any literature, like even children's literature that will tell you of things. And if it was like brushed under the rug. Like if you read a picture book or something, it was like one time and then like you lost it. And I'm like, well, what happened to that book? So yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things, thank you for that I really appreciate about your Substack. I feel like, and it could just be me, you may have a different experience, Nubia as well, but I feel like in Black reading spaces, I don't think that African literature is talked about as much. Um, and I don't know, I know I started off. I'm I live in Chicago, but I'm a teacher for Chicago Public Schools. Right now, I teach fourth and fifth grade. But I first started teaching, I was teaching middle school, and when I was teaching middle school, me and my grade level partner wanted our students to read Things Fall Apart. And when I tell you, it was like moving a mountain for my principal to agree to allow the kids to read this and buy the book. And it was, you know, all of this push. And don't get me wrong. Her concerns are more. And this is, and by the way, the school I teach at is probably 95% Black. And her main concerns was that the novel was too difficult for the students, and it dealt with a lot of complex things that that would go over their head, and just on and on and on. Luckily, she did relent after a lot of pushback we gave her. And that's probably, from what the kids told me, like one of their favorite books that they read all year. And I felt, and even like when I was in school, it's these books that are required reading and stuff like that. And I don't think that, honestly, I don't know that I read any. I don't think any African literature is part of the canon of books that you read. Of course, you have, like, Zora Neale Hurston, or you may have some of our traditional Black classics. But I don't think that I'm trying to think that I read like African literature probably till probably I was in college. you know so I really appreciate that you're bringing a lot of shine to African literature. um and this kind of goes into my next question, which you kind of already talked about, which was what first drew you to African and African diaspora literature. When did you realize this had become more than a reading interest? And I think kind of addressed that with your mentor. Was there anything beyond that you want to say about that, or that kind of sums up your interest in that?
Well, when you go on TikTok, and all these book influencers, you do not see much African literature. And people really think African literature is a genre by itself, but it has poetry, it has romance, it has historical fiction, which is what I more so gravitate to. It has the classic, so you're not missing anything. And back to what you said about fourth and fifth graders, I remember reading the Diary of Anne Frank in fifth grade. And if that isn't horrible, I don't know what is. And we went to a whole museum dedicated to that, to the Holocaust and everything. And so I don't see the difference in that and Things Fall Apart, which I did not read till I think my sophomore or junior year of high school. And even then, I never forgot Okonkwo.
Mhm.
And I always was looking for that book again because I couldn't remember until I became an adult.
Mhm.
I had remembered again. And even so, even with Black American literature, I did not really read Black American literature until I was in high school because I had read all the books in the library. My favorite genre was mystery and thriller. So I had read all of the Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys and all that stuff. And so I was like, but what else is there for me to read? And then I saw Sharon Draper's Copper Sun and November Blues. And I was like, oh my God, it's a picture with a Black person on it. And I got so excited because I had not seen that in a long time.
Mhm.
Um, and even I'm taking a class with the Center for Fiction. And
Mhm.
one of her books was Roll Up Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred Taylor. And I do remember reading that book in middle school for the Battle of the Books. But I don't remember anything about the book. It was never discussed. Now, that's a good book to read for
Mhm.
fourth or fifth graders, but
Yeah.
it was never discussed again. I think you
Yeah.
had to read it in order to enter into the Battle of the Books, but it was never addressed again. So I never got to realize the importance of it, like you would for the Diary of Anne Frank or something like that.
Hmm. Yeah,
And that's
for
wild to
sure.
me.
And just, I don't know if it was clear, but that the Things Fall Apart, I read when I was first teaching middle school, which was sixth, seventh, and eighth. I think my sixth grade read it. Right now I teach fourth and fifth, so they didn't read it, but it was the sixth grade that we advocated and got, them to read it. And it was, the conversation was really interesting because even though, you know, um, kids have their own ideas about what they think Africa is, or African people, about African people. I think that a lot of the kids had some really interesting comments, especially looking at the main character. They could recognize those, um, sort of masculine attitudes that the main character had, like in their own father. So even though, it takes place in a different country, the kids still drew connections, to their own lives. And Nubia is also putting in the chat. And Nubia, if I miss something, you can come off of mute. But Nubia was saying, just a reminder to our story, Lynelle did a good job of putting together dates, themes, people, etc. She also said it's
Oh
not
yeah.
about the comment. I'm sorry.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, I forgot I had did that. I would do the dates for each month. Like certain dates in history, like this day in our story, such and such happened. But I would go to Africa, the Caribbean, because it was a site I had found to use, and they've taken it down since. So it became hard for me to find those dates. But it's in the Caribbean, Africa, and Europe, like about the Windrush, those people from there who made contributions to British, the British Empire and everything. I would combine all of those things, and I even learned stuff myself. That was my favorite part of our story, to be honest, coming up with those dates. And I would like to do that again in the future sometime.
yeah. That sounds like a good thing. I need to go back and read. I'm somewhat relatively new to being active on Substack. I was kind of looking at content, but as far as like me actually writing and putting stuff on Substack, I think I started end of March. I want to say something like that. Nubia also said, glad you're bringing up the contradiction in reading and learning Anne Frank and European Jewish history, essentially, but not our own. Yes, absolutely. And there, this is a whole nother conversation. I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but there tends to be a lot more acceptance and embracing of what happened to the Jewish community, particularly in the Holocaust, than folks wanting to read about our history. But we that can be a whole nother conversation. So is there a particular book that fundamentally changed how you think about Africa, the diaspora, or even yourself as a reader?
I want to say one of the first books I read that were fiction when I started on this journey when I was like 16, 17. Because I was reading a lot of nonfiction work, Carter G. Woodson, Malcolm X. I was reading Maya Angelou. I was just grabbing anything I could get my hands on because it was all foreign to me. I read Asada Shakur's, biography and things like that. But this is one of the fiction books I picked up. I know you might can't.
It's a little blurred. I'm familiar with that book, so I know what you mean. But a long way gone. Yes,
Um,
memoirs of a
I
soldier.
yes, I know my mother had the DVD to the movie Blood Diamond,
Mm,
and it had been out for a while. And so when I read this book, that's when I realized that that was not a film for American entertainment. It was real.
mm,
What happened with Ishmael Bayer. And this book is less than 200 pages. I try to suggest literature, um, kind of jumping ahead, but try to suggest literature that's under 200 pages so it won't be too overwhelming.
mm,
But it just changed my mind about Africa. And I've had this book since probably like 2012. Um, it just really touched me in a way. that really what happened in that movie really happened to those boys. It was really child soldiers. And I felt like me speaking about Africa was a way to advocate for them um, through that way. I recommend this book to a lot of people. And I think it is on some reading list for middle school. But see, we didn't read this, and I was so disappointed because in Barnes and Noble, it was on that table. It was
Mm.
on the summer reading list. And we didn't read this book, so I felt like cheated. I was like, really? But what a conversation this would have been for kids what in eighth grade,
Mhm.
in ninth grade, what kind of conversation this would have been instead of reading The Giver and Lord of the Flies, we could have read this.
Right, right, absolutely. And it's so many things that I mean now, unfortunately, we live up underneath the government that's trying to take a lot of these books out of libraries and ban this and ban that, and only want a sanitized version of history. But I think with that book, there's so many things you can also tie to things dealing with like capitalism and um our I know the church that I used to attend, we even like for a while did a I guess you could say a protest, I don't know, but where because there's some type of uh natural element, I guess, in our phones that's primarily mined out of somewhere in Africa. And some of those mines, unfortunately, were employing children and things like that in them. And I know this doesn't fit all fit. Yeah, cobalt. Thank you,
Mhm.
Nubia. Necessarily always fit. Everything I'm saying is not necessarily in what happened to this young man, but there's exploitation going on in those spaces. Yeah, exactly. The in the Congo. Um, so what does, just to kind of shift gears just a little bit, getting into kind of building a personal library, what does that mean to you? Also, how do you decide which books get a permanent spot on your shelves? And also, which book or books are your most prized or favorite?
Um, I'm gonna say that. Hold on, I keep having a cough. Let me cough. It's real muggy here right now. The heat is like 105 outside, and no matter
Oh,
how you do the air, like it's still muggy. But anywho, um, it makes me feel privileged that I'm able to put these books on the shelves for my children and for cousins in my family and nieces and nephew who will hopefully be able to pick up these books because my mama didn't have these books on the shelves. I had to go searching for them, and I had to search really hard. Um, she did have a picture books when we were younger, featuring Black people like Harriet Tubman and things like that. I even
mm,
corrected a teacher on Harriet Tubman because I thought was a Harriet Tubman expert. But um, outside of that, we really didn't know ourselves. Had no reason to be proud. And I try to put things on my list that are 200 pages of list because I won't be so stressful. Because it
yeah.
is hard digging into another country, a whole nother continent. There is language in the books that they use their native language. Some of them I can't even pronounce, but it's not always Swahili. It's not always Arabic. Um, Unfortunately, that's not what it is because even like Congo, with Congo, they speak French there. So a lot of
Mm,
their books are published in French first before it gets to us in English. Sometimes
yes.
we have to wait a year or so. Same for books like in Senegal or Mali. The French colonized them, so they're going to get the books first. So we have to wait a couple years for it to be translated and everything. And sometimes it does get to be overwhelming. Lately, I feel like I've been overwhelmed, and sometimes I think I try too hard to understand a book. Like it's a book named Chintu, but it's spelled Kintu, and it's a multi-generational novel. And it's been hard for me to get into it because I'm not from Uganda. It's a Ugandan book, so they speak part of the Ugandan, and they also have different cultures and traditions that we're not used to. See, it might be easier to get into West African literature than it is
Mhm.
East African literature. It's two different worlds. It's two different
Mhm.
worlds, and it's a lot to absorb. So I try to keep
Yeah.
it short and sweet, unless it's um historical historically involved, but it can be difficult because I haven't even gotten through like half of the 54 countries because I keep doing a deep dive every time I do it. And I'm like,
Mhm.
this is gonna take me a long time to get to this. I can't go on a deep dive with every book. So
Right. Now,
yeah, but I try to
is
find
that
one
book 200 pages or less? The book you just referenced.
well into no, it's like 300, 400 pages. It is
Oh,
big. And I said I might say that towards the end.
okay.
Towards the end.
Right.
Because I still have it and I do want to understand it, even if I don't get to do a book review on it. Now I feel like I need to understand it now. Like how you read Toni Morrison's books and you got to keep trying at it. Yeah, that's how
Right.
I feel about that one.
And Nubia said, yes, it can be overwhelming when you don't even know where to start, for sure. Um, so, um, do you see collecting African literature as a form of preservation, cultural memory, or something else entirely? How do you kind of view it?
um, if I was getting vintage covers, then I would say more so of like collective memory because you can find some of those on thrift books sometimes. I've been going to thrift books lately to find certain covers from the African Writer series, like When Rain Clouds Gather. I got one of the older covers, but mainly it's just for me. Um, it's just for me, and I do have a source. I have to share it with you later so you can share with others because I couldn't find it. But I have like a Google Doc where it's a book from each country, and I do have to update it because I have found some um since I have made it. Because sometimes it's hard to find books. It is really
Yeah,
hard to find books on the other side of the world.
right,
So yeah.
right, sure. Um, what makes a book review valuable to you? Are you trying to persuade readers, start conversations, or just document your own reading journey?
I want to say start conversations.
Okay.
Because when reading okay, everyone knows things fall apart, but it's a trilogy. So the second book is No Longer at Ease. And I really
Right.
feel like that should be taught right after. Like the first semester you read Things Fall Apart and then you read No Longer at Ease. So you can get an understanding of current state in Nigeria.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, because when he wrote that in like the late 60s, 70s, that stuff is still going on in Nigeria. It's a lot of corruption with leaders. People get sent off to college in the UK and America. Then they come back with all these ideas, but they can't even. People who go to college to university in the country, they have all these ideas, all this ambition, but you can't even use it because of the leadership. It's just horrible.
Yeah,
The leadership is very selfish. They're they don't focus on the people. They only worry about them and their family, and that's disheartening.
right, right, for sure. And Nubia said that you should make a zine out of the list that you were referencing. The list of
Oh yeah, I should. That
that
might be
would be
something I
good.
work on. Hmm.
Um, and how have those conversations been? I know you have, quite a few followers on your Substack. How do you feel like those conversations have been?
Um, I feel like mainly towards Black Americans, they're able to feel a different connection with their with their ancestors. Because now it's a big debate about whether we're Native American or we're really from Africa and all of that. But like I'm on the East Coast of North Carolina, so North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Virginia, places like that. They still have the imprint of slavery there.
Mm.
You're still able to have the imprint, and it seems so familiar. Um, a lot of these coastal towns were built, off of them, like in Wilmington, North Carolina, and things like that. And so I feel like it's something that they can relate to, like the book Homegoing. This is also a multi-generational novel by Yagasi. I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
get it centered. Okay, right there.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about both sides. It's about two sisters. Um, they have different mothers but the same father. And one becomes married to a white man in the slave trade, and one becomes a prisoner of that same white man's slave trade. And it shows you how the two different lives coincide, but they share. They sh- it's like the generational trauma. They still share that. You can tell that on both sides of the family that was left in Africa, and the family that was taken to America. You can still see that there's trauma in the lineage there. It suffers a lot because of what happened to those two sisters.
Mm.
And they didn't know about each other. Just
Mm.
they didn't know about each other or anything. But it's just how things happen. And it makes you wonder, well, what would have happened if we would have been left there? Um, what would have happened if we never came here? And I used to wonder that when I was younger too. Like, what would have been happening if we were, still in Africa? Since, we talked about Africa when we were younger, but it was more like from a negative standpoint. It wasn't
Mm.
anything positive or anything like that. So, that's a great book too. And the part about African literature that I love to find a book that has part of their language in the book.
Mm.
Because a lot of people, they struggle with adding their cultural language, not the French or anything like that, not French. Um, but they struggle with adding their own native language to the book. Like Drinking from Graveyard Wells is a collection of short stories. Like this
Mm.
cover intrigued me. This cover,
Yeah, that's a beautiful cover.
yes, it's from Zimbabwe. I
Oh,
actually
wow.
talked to this author. It's the only author. Well, this the first author I was able to talk to. I've only talked to two authors, but sometimes if I have a question about the book, um, I still message her on social media. She was here on Substack, um,
Mm.
but I haven't seen her post anything as of late because she teaches too,
Mm.
here in the U.S. And I just find it great that she was deterred from putting her own language in this book, but she still prevailed and was able to do so. And I thought, like, after I read She Will Be King by Wayétu Moore, the Liberian novel, I knew this was the second book that I would have to show everyone because it's just wonderful and it has the culture. It tells the truth. It's like it's fiction, but it's like in a thriller sense like that.
Mm-hmm.
It has some, you know, kind of exotic stories, but they're really good and they'll keep you thinking. Because I have to
Mm.
refer back to this book too. And it's also less than 200 pages.
Okay.
Yes,
Nice.
less than 150 pages. So,
Okay. Nice. And I have to admit, my comfort zone, I tend to read mostly nonfiction, just in general. And majority of the books that I have um, on Africa from Africa are majority nonfiction. And so, your Substack has really helped me to, come out of my comfort zone. I had gotten this book from another Substack user. You may be subscribed to her, the Ebony Collector, Simone.
mhm.
So she was selling some books from her collection. So I got this one, Neo African Literature, A History of Black Writing by Jan Hines. John, I could be mispronouncing that, but I'm not sure if you're familiar with this or not.
Mhm.
But this, I haven't read it yet, But just looking through it, it is like really good because it kind of goes through like different genres of African literature. Like on here, early writers of African descent, pre-Islamic, early Islamic. It talks about African oral literature, Afro-Arabic literature, the tragedy of Southern Bantu literature, the Negro spiritual, and then it kind of goes throughout the African diaspora. But
Mm-hmm.
this is it feeds my itch of nonfiction, but it also gets into it. It kind of, I guess, primes someone who's not as doesn't read as much African literature, certainly not as much as you, and probably Nubia as well. I found this has helped me to kind of decide where to start, which leads into my next question. And you kind of already kind of given nuggets of this, but if someone wants to kind of get into reading more African literature, but feels a bit overwhelmed, and I know you reference, you kind of try to suggest books that are 200 pages or less so that people aren't overwhelmed. Is there a particular book or place that you would suggest people start?
I do like Homegoing, but it's more than 200 page. It's more than 200 pages. But in Ngugi wa Thiong'o, this is also East African literature. The River Between, it may have different covers. He recently passed earlier this year, I believe.
Yeah.
And this book is slim, but it had me longer for more. It talks about colonialism and traditionalism and how the people in this area, the Kikuyu people, his people, were were torn between what to go with the missionaries or go with their former ancestors. So just imagine this is after independence or right before independence. And so yes, your country has gotten their freedom, but what's the next move? You still have the missionaries who were their Christianity, and then you still have your old um your old traditions and cultural ties. So what does one do with that? And the older generation, um, they're probably saying, "Oh, you don't need to go to the missionary school and everything," but everything is in English now, and you're being judged by the way you speak English. The same way with Achebe, the author of Things Fall Apart. That was their difference. Achebe, English was there. It wasn't going anywhere, even though he's Igbo. Um, it wasn't going anywhere. So he was like, I'm gonna make the best of this English as I can. But Ngugi wa Thiong'o was like, no, because with this English, they've taken away because everything cannot be translated into English. Everybody thinks English is like the best language. There are emotions that do not have words in the English language, and we're gonna miss all of that, especially their naming system. The naming system that they name their children, um, just meaning for different things like days of the week. It's a different thing. It's a different feeling that goes with that. And The River Between is a good book. It left me longer for more. I'm disappointed it's not a part two. I was like, a Kenyan person had recommended me this book, and I'm like, well, where's the rest? And I read it like 3 times. So it's good. It's really good. And it's not
Yeah.
Swahili in the book either. Excuse me. It's not Swahili, it's Kikuyu language. So it goes even deeper than Swahili.
I,
It's their older language.
Yeah. I think I have that on my shelves, but I need to read it. And I have a question about Ngugi wa Thiong'o, which I'll get to. But when you were just speaking on translations, which gets into the next question, do you feel that because, as you know, you've already talked about a lot of these works are translated into English, do you feel that there's something that is that gets lost in that translation? Or do you see translation as kind of creating something new rather than just simply transferring meaning? Um, if that makes sense. Do you feel something is lost, or you think something is kind of new is created?
I do think that something is lost, but see, we wouldn't know. that it's lost unless we were part of the older generation there. We wouldn't know
Yeah.
what was lost. And even some of the young people, they don't know what's lost. So we should just take what we have for now and create something new with it. But we must all understand that even in Nigeria alone, it's like 500 different languages. So just imagine the entire continent. Like you would never be able to get the meaning of everything. Um, Even in Yoruba, it's different dialects. Like with English, we have the Southern dialect. People from up north talk different in the Midwest. Like it's always something that's gonna be lost in between, but we're just gonna make the best of what we have, like Achebe said. We're gonna make the best of it.
Right, for sure. And Nubia was in the chat quoting what you said, that we don't know what's lost. And it kind of makes me think about too, like, we know that certain traditions were, translated over when, people came from Africa, were enslaved, and, came to the United States. And we kind of have these oral histories, or we have these histories that were passed down through families. You know, I know certain things about what Alex Haley wrote is controversial because,
Mhm.
according to some people, he stole that um from oh my goodness, the woman that wrote Jubilee, Margaret. I don't know why I'm failing to remember her name,
Mhm.
but so we know that certain things may have gotten lost in translation, but also, I guess, as we had to adapt to the conditions we were under as slaves and adapt to a new culture, something was also kind of, I guess, created that was new too. And I know that's not necessarily the same as translating, works from Africa, but I just think about kind of, parts of our culture probably were lost, and then we, translated it into something new. um well, my next question about Ngugi wa Thiong'o, I thought about him when I went to undergrad. I went to Dillard in New Orleans, so HBCU, and the provost that was there at the time I was there, she actually knew Ngugi wa Thiong'o. They had like a personal relationship. I don't know. I don't know if she said that I don't know how they knew each other. I don't know if they uh went to school together. I don't know. I know she was even trying to get him to like come and teach at Dillard or whatever. I don't know if he took up that offer. But anyway, he did come to the campus, and he, talked to us. And I remember one of the things that he talked about, or kind of argued, was that language carries culture and memory, and that writing primarily in colonial languages can distance African literature from its communities of origin. And how do you think that argument, as someone who reads and recommends literature, um, how do you think about that argument and what he says? Do you,
Well, that is true, but at the same time, you know, I want to say he lost his fight because either or, they both at one point had to live in exile from their own countries because of what they wrote. So it doesn't even matter if it's in English or Kikuyu, his language. What matters is the fact they were putting out the word and telling the truth about colonialism, capitalism, imperialism, all of that. So whether you tell it in the colonialist language or your native language, if you're writing the truth, it's gonna be, upsetting to people. And they both had to live in exile either by choice or they were threatened because he was threatened.
mm-hmm.
And I think he had to run away. Achebe, he chose to live in exile, but it was still many people against him also. It was
Mm-hmm.
many people against him and what he was doing. So I'm gonna say that we're gonna embrace the truths that we do have. We're gonna embrace the them like in the Zimbabwean book, she has the Shona language from because her tribe is the Shona. Um, we're gonna embrace what we have, but we're just gonna take it day by day, take it as it is in English.
Yeah. And I think, I don't know, whether you see it this way, but the point you made about how, you like or wish, or you like how, if certain authors infuse their native language into the work, do you feel like that's maybe one way to bridge that? Is that, if authors, kind of infuse some of their, their native language into the work? Do you think that's one way to, um it may not account for everything that's lost, but kind of, creates a happy medium? Because I you know, kind of think about, to a certain extent, and this may not be the best comparison, but we know that Zora Neale Hurston has a lot of works where she, they're told through the dialect of, black dialect, whether it's, a black person in, South Florida, or whether it's someone who, came from Africa, and they, um and to some people, those works are a little bit complex, because kind of have to, if you're not used to either hearing that dialect, much less speaking in it, there's, some work that has to be done. But it also creates a more, in my opinion, a more real experience of understanding that character, and really mentally kind of being in the position of that character. And so I'm wondering if that same type of work is being done when you are reading these works that also preserve some of that original language in the particular work.
Right, I do agree with that. And it's funny because every time I read about, Africa, like you said, with the dialect, you always come back to Black America. So they try to say that we were enemies and we hated each other, but these authors, they risked their life work. Zora, she didn't die a rich woman, but she
Yeah.
went to Haiti. She went to the Caribbean.
Yeah.
She took that risk. She was an anthropologist, even though even us, our black men didn't want to give her, her flowers while she was living, and felt insulted because speaking the correct English, speaking down south, kind of reminds me of Achebe in the Gugu Wathiongo
Mm.
in a way. Okay, if you're gonna speak in English, do it right. You know what I'm saying? We're trying to
Mm.
get above that country talk. But I enjoy reading it like that because really that's how I talk, and I have to switch up in different spaces. But that's the way I talk, and I just, and I'm not gonna change it for anybody. I got a family member who I'm real close to. She's like, "Why do you talk like that? That's not how you pronounce the word." But girl, we grew up like that, and when you're in the space with your people, you should be able to, be in that safe space, and we
Right.
didn't give
Right.
her the credit for what she was doing. It's a book on Ethiopia that I read. It's called um mm, The Shadow King. And it's a
Mm.
thicker book. That's why I didn't recommend it. It's a thicker book, like 300, 400 pages. But I'm back to Black America because it was talking about how Italian was at war with Ethiopia because they were the only one that weren't colonized. And I learned
Mm.
something about Black America too. We were willing to go to Ethiopia to fight,
Mm.
but America wouldn't let us. They wouldn't give you your passport if you were going to go fight. But yet they sent you over there to fight in World War One and Two. But you couldn't fight on behalf of Ethiopia. The
Right.
only,
Right.
and we knew that was the only country that had not been colonized. It's in the Bible. Marcus Garvey said, "Look to Ethiopia for the Black King. Look to Africa for the Black King." And that's what we were doing. Those are the only references we had, and we were trying to do what we thought was right, and we couldn't do it. So there's not that much difference, between us if you really want to look at it. It's the same thing.
Yeah. And some people, along kind of those lines, also feel like, Haiti is in the position it's in, and has, been under the various, sanctions and treatment it has, because Haiti refused to, well, they resisted slavery, and we know with the Haitian Revolution how they defeated the French. And Europeans and even white America has, um treated them a certain way because they refused to be, colonized. Um, do you and we've kind of talked a lot about these different types of translated works. So when you approach a work knowing that it's been, written in a different language, whether that's Yoruba, Swahili, Arabic, French, what have you, do you find there's a different way that you sort of approach the reading, and not, maybe this may be hard to answer if you don't necessarily, originally speak these languages, but I mean, I guess we could take it as general. Is there a certain way, I guess, that you may approach the reading because of that, or, not necessarily?
Not necessarily, but I do get excited that the author was brave enough to put it in there because with the Drinking from Graveyard Wells, when she was writing that part of her MFA, and the people in her class, it was a person in her class that put Latin in their story. And her teacher said, "Well, why are you putting that language in there? People don't speak that here." And then she made the reference, well, that person's putting Latin and people don't speak Latin anymore. So it was that deep. Like the professor really, he didn't want to take that fight. Like why, why would you answer her out of all things? Um, Even with Caribbean literature, when you have Jamaican patois and all of that in there, I find so many similar things to the way we talk, our
Mm,
slang, to the way they talk, and it's good to feel a piece of home. And sometimes maybe I think, well, maybe I'm thinking too far, but sometimes it's good to find a piece of home
mm,
elsewhere. So like we're really not really all that different. We've had the
yeah,
same things happen to us as a whole collective race and things like that. And we would never be done with studying Afro literature. It's always going to be something to study with it. It's
right,
never going to die out. Because I know in Brazil they used to think the Portuguese were thinking that they could get the brown out of them by mixing with the natives. I'm like, no, that's not how it's done. That's not how it's
right,
done. The natives, the indigenous people and the Africans they brought over, they thought if they mix with them enough, you will whitewash it out. And we're not going anywhere.
right.
We don't die, we multiply.
Right, for sure. Um, and we, I think, you know, language and race, are kind of intertwined in terms of certain people have attitudes about more favorable attitudes about certain languages, and, negative attitudes about other languages. And, I think the United States, I know, um, when when I was overseas, I think I was in France or whatever, and was having a conversation like with the taxi cab driver. And, here in the United States, people, you can take a foreign language or whatever in high school or on your own, or there's apps you can learn things. But, a lot of other countries in Africa as well, um, most people speak their native language, and along with English, they're multilingual, and that's something that is, an asset. And I feel like here, being multilingual is not necessarily something that is um, necessarily pushed, um, like I think it should be. And so there's this, I feel like, superiority by some people about, as I think Nubia, speaking of that, Euro languages, she says, yes, I had to ask myself at one point why we're into all these damn Euro languages, but not Swahili, Wolof, or dark folks language in general. Yeah, absolutely. I know here in Chicago, we have some board members. I'm working this job this summer with the Chicago Teachers Union, and we have some board members that are running, and one of their pilot programs is they're trying to get do a Kiswahili pilot program in some of the schools. And I mean, the level of pushback by some of the, you know, people in the system is just, ridiculous. But we have Mandarin, and we have, of course, French and all of these other things. But you know, they don't want to spend the money on Kiswahili when, there's a significant portion of Black people who make up Chicago public schools. And, but moving on to the next question, Nubia said, why the hell would I want to learn Mandarin? Right. Exactly.
That's
Um,
true. That's true.
um, so we're getting kind of close to the end. I don't want to keep you too long. And then I'm sorry, I don't know if you heard the noise, but my toddler keeps banging on the door saying, "Mommy, let me in." When I told her I was going to be there, she's
Yeah,
upstairs.
I understand that.
So I'm sorry. She's banging on the door, demanding that I let her in. And her older brother's upstairs, sitting with her. But of course, my toddler is extremely extroverted. She has a lot different personality than me. So she hears, I think, talking going on in here. So she feels like this is where the energy she needs to be. So I have
Mm,
the door
I
locked,
understand.
fighting for her life, trying to get in. So I apologize for the noise. But what conversations about African literature do you think we're still not having? And I wanted to say, it's not so much a question, but Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, Half of a Yellow Sun, um, I really like, and I also like the movie. And I it's heartbreaking what she's going through right now. How her
Mhm.
one of her twin boys was, you know, died basically. I mean, I want to say almost killed in the hospital. Are you familiar with what happened to her
Right.
son,
Hmm.
the hospital in Nigeria? And I was reading the other day, well, a couple of days ago, a letter where she kind of detailed, her communication back and forth with the hospital, and how they're shifting blame and trying to, save face. And in addition to this incredible loss and grief, I can't imagine, like, what she's going through. um but that's kind of an aside. But what conversations, I guess I'm saying, um do you think we're still not having? And I also wanted to ask, this kind of dovetail with that. I think you mentioned earlier of kind of, these um attitudes that, and I think I mentioned too, we may have about just Africa in general. And I like to think so a lot of it is just people are not really informed, and we get so much propaganda around the continent of Africa. And even like there's Black people who get offended if you call them African American, and they'll be quick to say, well,
Hmm.
I've never been to Africa, I'm not, African
Hmm.
American, I'm, Black man. And so it's this um form of self-hate, I believe, um around it. So I'm just curious to see, like, from what you can gather, and maybe Substack is different because it's a receptive audience, but in conversations you have, do you feel like, African Americans, Black people are embracing African literature? Do you feel like there's still a lot of misinformation or even negative attitudes there around, even if it's not about literature, maybe just about Africa and African people, the continent, what have you?
I still think that the attitude is negative, and even when you see the celebrities going there, like Sierra and her husband, they went to Benin.
Mm.
Um, I think
And
Ja
Wayne,
Rule.
I don't mean to cut you off, but didn't because I saw something where Sierra posted and they gave her some type of citizenship or something like that.
Hmm.
Okay, right.
Yeah. Um, I don't think it's being done the right way. Most Black Americans can't even afford to leave their own state, much less leave the U.S. of America, period. Um, but I think it's still negative there. I hear people talking about it all the time. It's um it's very negative, it's very nasty. And I hear people asking, I'm not an African. Well, tell me where the slave ships are. Those people at work, tell me where the slave ships are. They are not going to have every slave ship from the 16th century, okay? That was 4,000 years ago.
I mean,
And
I don't even understand a question even like that. Like, I mean, you know.
Ignorance, ignorance, and who don't even embrace their own towns, black neighborhoods, because we founded things by ourselves. I remember in Wilmington. Ooh, what did I go to? It was something that they were having at Tryon Palace, but it's a traveling exhibit for the. It's called "We Built This," and it's about the architecture. Well, I got so tickled because it was a Nigerian who was sent there, and it was a hurricane. It was hurricane season in Wilmington, and he had to repair the slave houses when he got there, and all of that. He knew how to do that when he got there.
Mm,
So you can't say we couldn't talk. You couldn't say we didn't have no language because we did. It was several languages on that boat. It was probably more than 10 languages on that boat. And for
mm,
people to who have 10 different languages, we're just gonna say 10 on that boat to merge together and it mix English in with what they have, that's freaking amazing for them to be able to understand each other. And then
mhm,
they understand each other without words. They use the drums that were eventually banned because they realized that was going to be an uprising.
mm,
So the white people, and so you cannot tell me how brilliant they are. They probably
mhm,
were enemies when they were there. You know, everyone has that. That's a part of history. They have
mhm,
strife when it comes to land and stuff like that. They may not have been close because you know you stay where your tribe is. And I think I learned recently under a tribe is a clan. So it's always different family lines. You know, just because they look the same, they were not a part of the same thing. They weren't a part of
mhm,
the same culture, but they merged that together and they brought it here and they left a little bit for us. What they try to erase, but they left some for us.
mhm,
Like I think even if I heard a story, it was on TikTok about a person who was researching things in Sierra Leone, and it was a family song. And the person who heard it say, "How did you know about that song?" That's a song from Sierra Leone. And eventually they took that lady to meet the people of Sierra Leone. So that song, that language was saved from that long in a song. And I think
mm.
that's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. Wow. Um, Nubia said, say that, Lionel. Um, and she said, read Kick in the Belly. They speak about this briefly about what you were talking about, the language barrier we had on the boat and how they navigate it. She said it's so short but intense. Is that a novel or a poem, Nubia?
Hold on, it's easier if I come off. It is. It's a about. It's more Caribbean centered, if that kind of makes sense. But it's speaking on like enslaved women and the way that like we navigated it, but it doesn't really get too deep into details into the United States, which is kind of why I had picked it up because I haven't heard that narrative of people being like dropped off on those other islands. But I would definitely suggest you read it, and they have it in audiobook too. It's very short.
Okay.
Like I think it's almost like a 2 hour listen.
Okay.
And Lynelle, do
And,
you find thank you, Nubia. Do you find, because one of the things that I've heard in conversations I've had with other Black people as it relates to African literature, is that there's this sense they feel like a lot of the subject matter is too heavy, whether it's talking about colonialism, or apartheid, or even you know child soldiers, or what have you, that it's too heavy or too negative, or and so um there's a um either hesitancy or just a unwillingness to want to read these things because of they feel like the subject matter is too heavy. Have you encountered that type of feedback? um do you think that that feedback is valid? Um, what are your thoughts on that?
they always say they want it's a lot of trauma-filled books.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't like trauma, well, I'm not saying trauma-filled, but mainly historical fiction, maybe so. But
Yeah.
fiction, you kind of dance around historical things a little bit. And I guess the fact that I used to read a lot of nonfiction stuff before, I could recognize it in the fiction novels. But if you don't already know, you don't know. But read the romance and read the magical realism, the speculative fiction. Read that. Um, it's not all trauma. Well, we could say a lot of the classic novels, a lot of the stuff we read in school was like trauma filled. It had to do with
Yeah.
other people, like
Right.
not even Anne Frank, but Night by Eli Weasel, however you say his name. Reading
Yeah.
Night. That was trauma filled, but we still read it and we had to write
Right.
about it.
For sure. It Nubia said that sounds like an excuse because our literature is the same. Definitely, the coldest winter ever was trauma filled. Right. Right.
Hmm.
For sure. For sure. Um, finally, what do you hope readers take away after spending time with Afro Reads?
I hope that readers um, learn to love themselves as who they are, whether you're Afro-Brazilian. I'm getting into a lot of their literature, whether you're in the Caribbean, whether you're African, because sometimes it's just so much self-hate. It's so much self-hate that's been put on us. I hope we find a way to love ourselves and love our work. And even if read the whole book, come up with like a list of short stories. Um, And you see, Nigeria gets a lot of the bulk because they're like the African literature canon. Like Jamaica is for the Caribbean. Um, it's heavy literature, but it's so many things to read. I came up with a Caribbean list recently, and I'm like, I didn't even know it was this many Caribbean countries. And now I feel like I need to do a part two. And it's not. I'm not gonna be happy till it's complete because um, I just want us to love where we come from, not in terms of sports and everything. A lot of people didn't know there was a country named Botswana until the Olympics. A lot of people don't know about St. Lucia until the Olympics. Like we know we're runners. We've been running forever, right? So like not in terms of sports, but I want people to just embrace and love African people. Like get away from the stigma of the hair, the skin, the way you talk, the way you smell. It's just that's right, Nubia. We are more than entertainment. People just make up stuff instead of trying to understand why it is and where a person comes from. And see, when you're in let's say you're in Nigeria, I keep bringing up Nigeria because of all the different languages spoken there. And different tribes. I think it's 500 tribes, but 250 languages there. Um, so if you want to do business with someone who speaks Yoruba, you're gonna have to learn Yoruba, or they're gonna cheat you, right?
Right.
I mean that's anybody. You have to learn Igbo. It's a whole bunch of other little small little languages wrapped up in that. It's so many different languages. So if you really want to learn something, you'll learn it.
Right, definitely. And it's like I've had this conversation with Nubia before, if you're motivated to read something, then you're going to do the work to understand. It doesn't even have to be a language. It could just be words that you don't necessarily know the meaning of. If you're motivated and it's something you want to read, you're going to get through it. I mean, and also think about all of these, and I don't read a lot of like science fiction and high fantasy or what have you, but the books that I have read or tried to read, they make up languages, that for whatever world that they're, building. And, those people who are motivated and like that genre, even though it's a nonsensical language that has been made up for that particular world building, they do the work to make sense of that language in the context of whatever that world is that they're building. you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it goes back to, again, your attitude and you know, how you feel in general. If you're already kind of walking in with negativity, skepticism, or what had some levels of discomfort, then that's just probably going to put you off further, instead
Mm-hmm.
of, you know, if you're motivated, excited, whatever, then you're going to appreciate and like to see that. Because, you know, my thing, if you're reading something that was originally in a different language and situated in a different culture, you know, why wouldn't you want that language in there? That's only going to deepen your understanding and connection to that, you know, novel, if you're, you know, if you will, those characters and so on and so forth, because this is not your particular culture unless you're from that culture that you're reading.
Right.
So why wouldn't you want as many pieces of that culture infused into that literature as you're reading? Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and I did want to ask this, not a question on here, and I'm not familiar with the series, but I caught some, I guess it's some controversy. The woman who wrote it's real popular, blood, I think it's the Blood and Bone.
Children of
uh
the Blood and Bone. Uh-huh.
Correct. Now, and I apologize, I have to ask these questions. I don't have, I guess I haven't read it, mostly because it is fantasy, and again, that's not really an area that I read a lot. But the author, is she originally from Africa? Do you know?
No, she she was born in America, but she's first generation um over here. Her parents are from Nigeria, and I think it's crazy because she learned about um it's parts of Yoruba culture in Brazil, because they
Okay.
went there first to South America, then the Caribbean, then the North America. So she was on a trip, I think, to Brazil or somewhere in South America, and that's where she learned about part of Yoruba culture. And when she asked her mom about it, this is how she got the inspiration to write the book. She asked her mom about it. She was like, "Oh yeah, yeah," Orisha or something like that. And she was like,
Right.
"Yeah, yeah." And she was like, "Why didn't you talk about it?" Then her mom was like, "I didn't think you were interested." But
Mm.
it's controversy because um the main character Zaylee was a dark skinned girl in the film, and they picked
You said
Amanda.
in
I
that
forgot her
book?
last name. I'm sorry, in the book, and they
Okay.
picked Amanda, who's light skinned, to play her part. And there comes a point when it comes to these books and stuff. Um, was when you make a film adaptation, I guess the author loses control. It's about the director. And even though she wrote the script, I guess there's other things. I guess she was like, well, I'll give in to this, let Amanda play this part. But black people are really into colorism, but I guess they felt that it was the book did great. She also had trouble with people receiving her book too, because they was like she's trying to be like J.K. Rowling, like the new Harry Potter and all this kind of stuff. You know,
Mhm.
I do like it, the first two books, but it kind of drifted off from me. The third one, but it was really good. My sister likes fantasy, so she recommended it to me. And I said, I'm not gonna read it. And she was like, but it got African people in it. So I know you were crazy about Africa, so just read it. So I did end up getting into it. Um, but I'm sorry that it's turning out like it is, but I still will see the film. Even though she said she will not see the film. She just lost control over ownership, I guess, when it came
Yeah.
to
Okay. Because I on this group I'm in on Facebook, I think it's called Black Girls Read or something like that, and they had like this thread, and hundreds of people were commenting. And again, I haven't read the book, and I didn't know anything about the, you know, the selection of the skin tone of the actor, because people were kind of like, the tone I got from a lot of the comments was that some people didn't really understand why she was so, I guess, kind of hostile towards promoting it. And I guess she even, one of the actors like reached out to her or something, and she told her, don't ever contact me again, or something. The author told this actor or whatever, you know, don't ever contact me again regarding this book. So I mean, and so a lot of people were like kind of expressing a lot of kind of heartbreak, I guess, because a lot of people like the book and it's so popular. and it is a Black film too, that there's this, I guess, hostility that she kind of has. And I saw some comments what you were saying about that she kind of maybe lost control, and that a lot of people were also commenting saying that they liked, because it's what, it's a trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that they liked the first two books, but the last one felt almost kind of like she was either rushed to,
Yeah,
you
it was
know.
real forced. And I bought it and I was disappointed because the first two, me and my sister shared the books and I was just so excited for the third. And it was smaller than the other two and I was just disappointed. It felt forced. Um, but things happen or whatever. And then she was also writing the script for the movie at the same time. But I feel like we run into this before because I think who played Nina Simone in the movie and they made
Right,
her face darker. Zoe, she's something
right.
else. Um,
Saladana or something like that.
yeah,
Zoe Saldana, whatever her name is.
yeah, and it's a dark skinned girl on the cover. The actually the cover kind of reminds me of the author. She's very mystical herself, and
Mm,
she was like, I guess I feel like maybe she was like, well, I can give into this. But people were still going to watch the movie. I think that's a
mm.
Hollywood thing. We were still going to watch the movie, whether, it didn't matter, but only certain things you can give to. It's disheartening, but I will watch the film.
Yeah,
And I hope she didn't sell her rights and stuff to it and all of that. I hope she didn't do too much of that because I'm pretty sure she's like just she's disappointed in it. I think
yeah,
she's
yeah,
disappointed.
yeah. That's when and then some people are like, well, she sold it to him, so And then from what I saw, it's kind of like an A-list kind of group of actors in it. I saw um in oh my goodness, Lupita, is she supposed to be in it?
I
Lupita.
don't know. Okay, the girl who was in Wicked, Nubia put it in the chat. She was in
Okay,
Wicked,
yeah,
and I
Cynthia
think
Erivo. Yes,
the boy
correct.
David, somebody who plays a Snowfall. Um, See, I don't really watch the TV and movies like I used to. I gotta be real intentional about what I watch because there's so much crazy stuff going on. But I know their name. Yeah, the Black London cast. Um, for Super Sale, somebody's in that book. But she went to Nigeria to cast people, and it started from there. She went to Nigeria to cast people, even as extras or whatever. And she didn't pick like people or something like that. She didn't pick the people that the her fans wanted her to pick. Um,
Okay.
and I guess that's also being torn in that way too. Hollywood wanted her to do something else, but she had her intention of doing one thing. Um, she's Nigerian. She wanted Nigerian people in the film, and she did get a couple people, but they're like famous people. They're not like maybe the extras. I don't know, but a lot of Nigerians, people who are of Yoruba in the Yoruba tribe, they do not like the book because it's not.
Mm,
But see, with us, we don't know, and that's what we mean by mixing up the language and things. But see, her
yeah,
mom didn't teach her. She learned from a trip to Brazil that is her culture, her parents' culture. But her parents, they may not be into it. They were trying to get to, America, and nothing was wrong with that. But they were
mhm,
trying to focus on getting their kids here and adapting here. So just like with African literature, how do you adapt?
mhm,
Like, and how do you adapt and have a piece of you that's home and adapt to where you are presently? Like, I can't imagine that. Like, how do you hold on to your true culture? Do you just forget it, or do you just cast it aside as it's just not important? You're trying to live the American way.
yeah. Do you think that um do you personally think that um or how do you, I don't know how to ask this, but I guess what are your views on Black Americans who may not be from a particular African country that they choose to write about? Um, do you think that's okay, or do you think it's fine, but they need to be careful and make sure they've done all their research? And how do you feel about that if a Black author, wants to write something, piece of literature, and they're not necessarily from that particular country, or much less know the language? How do think they should navigate?
You have to do your research. You know how long it takes these authors to write these books who are in America about America? They do their research. You can't
Right.
just write a book in a year. You got to be thorough. Some people, it takes them like 3 years, and of course you're not going to get it perfect, but you're not going to get it perfect and everything. But I mean, like Yagasi for the book Homecoming, home yeah, Homegoing. You don't. She's Ghanaian, but she went to school here. But she didn't know necessarily, I don't think, everything about American ways. But I'm sure she fact checked. It took her a while to write this book. She got inspired by going to the castles, the slave castles in Ghana,
Mm.
on a trip. But she had been in America longer than she'd been in Ghana, but she did her research. She made sure she had the right names and stuff like that, and let you know that this tribe and this tribe were not the same. I mean, she did her work, and all writers need to research, no matter what you're writing about. If you're writing about Africa or anything, you always have to do your research.
Yeah, for sure. And that, like you say, that's what anything, you definitely need to write research. I know the woman who wrote Akatawich, and I don't want to mispronounce, and Nettie Okorafor,
Mm-hmm.
who I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
her books. I know she's real pop. Well, I saw her at an event in Chicago. I don't know if she's originally from Chicago or went to school here or what. I feel like she has some association with Chicago, and she's like, a lot of the like Black bookstores here, have a lot of her books, and she's been there a lot. And she goes to a lot of the Black bookstores, and she I think she writes like kind of in high fantasy. Well, I don't know if it's called high fantasy, but um fantasy as well. Can you hear me? I think something froze. Am I frozen, or is that okay? Okay, you're on mute.
Okay, I know that was me that time. I'm
Okay.
using the Wi-Fi from my phone now, and my phone is dying, so that's probably
Oh,
why.
okay. We're about to wrap this up. I'm sorry.
You're
But
fine.
I'm saying, you heard what I was saying about the a core.
See, I don't like her books. They're fantasy. See, the only reason why I read Children's Blood and Bone because my sister recommended it. But I don't really like fantasy either. It's not my thing. I do like Harry Potter, but I think because we grew up reading the books, it's a little bit different. But
Mhm.
she is Nigerian American, so I don't know if she's first generation American, but a lot of people love her, and her latest book, Death of an Author, won a lot of awards. But
Mhm.
I think that's less of the fantasy part though. But a lot of people love her books, but
Yeah.
I don't read that kind of stuff.
Right, right. Well, now you could do a master class on this. And if you do, please let me know so I can be the first to sign up. Thank you so
Definitely.
much for doing this. Thank you, Nubia, for recommending her. Um, and I think I was already following you, um, on Substack, but I know you and Nubia know each other personally. And Nubia had some comments. She said something else has clearly happened that we won't ever know. It makes me feel like she didn't have a team or support behind this. This is in regards to the Blood and Bone actor, I think. She said we definitely cosplay and colonize our own people, and that's a bigger conversation, especially if you have no relationship with the people, place, or care about the place as a whole. Yes. So thank you so much. All of the people that I interview, I self-published this little book called The ABCs of Black Bibliophiles. And so these are different like Black book collectors or institutions. And so I'll message you and get a mailing address and send this to you as a thank you for having this conversation with me. And thank you so much. And, you are providing a wealth of service to all of us. I've learned so much through your Substack and in this conversation. And when people, ask me about, African literature, I'm going to be pointing in your direction, into your Substack, because, you know all the things, and I'm serious. That master class, you need to teach it. And if you ever do a zine, as Nubia was saying, I'll be getting it.
Thank you so much. Thank you for thinking of me. I was nervous about today. And I was like, this is something really that Nubia would do. And here's Nubia right here. I was thinking about her all day because I was gonna message her after this and see there she is.
Okay, so you all didn't talk about this. Okay.
But I'm glad we had the same thoughts about Nubia.
Yeah, and Nubia was one of the first conversations that I had. Nubia actually may have been my first conversation. But I put these on the YouTube channel, so if you want to go back and view it, you can.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
So, yeah.
Before y'all get off,
yeah.
Can you please tell Yalonda about I think it's Celise. Sorry, I don't know if I got her name right. The Toni Morrison thing that y'all doing?
Yeah.
This year, me and one of my friends, Celise on Substack, we wanted to do a book club, but I'm busy reading and she's busy reading. And so I said, well, let's read Toni Morrison together. So one of her favorites was Sula. We did Sula in February. We just did what did we just read? Jazz. And Jazz was so good. I tried to read Toni Morrison during COVID. Epic fail. Okay, epic fail. I didn't get through every book and I was still confused afterwards. So in October, we're gonna be reading Song of Solomon.
Yeah,
And she
Nubia was
references
telling me
North Carolina in that book. So
okay.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Nubia was telling me that, and I'm like, oh yeah, and I went on your Substack, and you said you all are going to be discussing it like in October. You said
Yeah.
Okay. Is this something where people sign up, or do you like put out a Zoom before the meeting date or what have you?
You're gonna have to sign up, but we don't have the Zoom link now. But I'm gonna make sure you get yours first when we do it, because Celise does all of that, and so I'm gonna start promoting it at the end of August and September, because we did Jazz for Juneteenth and we did Sula in February. So we the people voted and we voted to do Song of Solomon for the last part of the year. And if people want to keep going into the next year, we're gonna pick 3 authors to do. James Baldwin is one of them. Me and her haven't decided on the other 2 to read some of their works for the next year.
Okay, excellent. Well, I definitely want to do it. So when you put it out, I definitely sign up. Thank you for that. Well, thank you so much. It's good to meet you in person. And, I look forward to seeing your content come through and everything. And I was looking at your recommendations for kids. And I know one of Gianna is my 3-year-old's name. One of her favorite books is you had one book, I think it's called Little Leaders. It's like the book where it's like little, I think it's called My Little Leaders. Oh my God, I don't even know what, but they have a board book version of it. Like she has 2. She has one that focuses on like men and one women. And then she did the board book that focuses on the women, and you had one of them on your recommendations for kids, and I don't know why the author's name is failing me, but I just wanted to say that one that you have, the board book version, is one of my 3-year-old's favorite books, and she goes through it. It has like Mae Jameson and Harriet Tubman, whatever, and she'll be like, "Mommy, that's you. Mommy, that's me."
Oh,
and
I found myself getting into kids literature. It's she's Dominican and Puerto Rican. She's a children's author. Alyssa Reynoso. I'm gonna send you her Substack link. She's a children's author, and so she writes with Caribbean influence, Hispanic influence. Um, and me and her were doing Kid Lit Summer last year. It was her idea, and I was like, "What is this?" But I found myself having so much fun because my kids are older now; they're 10 and 7. But I still buy picture books for my 7-year-old, but it kind of brought back the little kid in me, and so now that's something we're gonna keep doing. Cause me and Nubia did one for Black History Month. So
Oh, okay.
so yeah, and so that's really fun. Gets into your childlike self.
Yeah.
It's
How are
point.
your I'm sorry to cut you off, but I'm always interested. How are your, if you don't mind telling, how are your kids' attitudes towards reading?
My son not so much. But he likes nonfiction. So he likes to
Okay.
read about animals. When he learned that fiction is fake in second grade or first grade and
Mhm.
nonfiction is real, he's been wanting to read real things ever since. So he's a nonfiction person. But lately we listened to the audiobook of Jason Reynolds' Ghost that I recommended last year on the Kid Lit list. And it was a good audiobook, and we just got a book from Barnes and Noble. But he's a factual person. You know how boys are. He likes math and science and stuff. But my daughter, she loves reading. It's an
Okay.
app called Epic.
Yeah,
That
I use that with my students. Yeah, because it's
uh-huh.
free and everything. Yep. And
Yeah.
Ghost is one of the books that I read with my fifth grade. They really like that one, Ghost.
It it is
Yeah.
really good. I had never read Jason Reynolds before, but that book was good. It was very good. So I'm gonna finish the series with him. Um,
Okay.
But yeah, but see, in my household, we were little. My mother was an educator like you, so our penmanship and our readership had to be top tier, and so
Mhm.
maybe the reason why she recommended like classical literature and stuff. Like I read stuff, of course, with Britain, Little Women, Sherlock Holmes, and stuff
Yeah.
like that. I didn't know Toni Morrison. I didn't know June Jordan. I didn't know Richard Wright because it's a book, Invisible Man. Is it
Yeah.
Richard Wright?
Ralph,
I only know
Ralph
about the
Ellison.
other Invisible Man by H.G. Wells. I don't know this one.
Right. You
So
talking about Ralph Ellison, right?
yeah. Ralph
Yeah.
Ellison. Yeah. I know the other one. And
Right.
so we read about all that British literature stuff. So
Yeah.
that's what they had in school. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you again so much giving your time. Thank you, Nubia, for joining us. And I'll reach out to you to get a mailing address to send this to you. And I'll be looking out for the Toni Morrison sign up as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. You ladies have a good evening.
You too. You too. Have a good
All right.
weekend. All
All
right.
right. Bye bye.
Bye.